Hi, welcome to the Kabbalah and Chasidus Explained Series number 17. Thanks for coming, and thanks all for watching online. Welcome to this special class. This is titled Tzimtzum Part 3, the actual Tzimtzum, the actual contraction. This is given and recorded at the Young Israel of Brighton Beach. Many hours were put into this class. Generally my class, especially this class, as I call it, a special class, because I put in crazy amount of hours preparing it really for months, if you will, maybe 20 hours, 30 hours, I don't know. So we put in a lot of work, and we hope to deliver a quality class that you're able to understand these great concepts of Tzimtzum, this great concept of Tzimtzum, the way it's explained in Chassidus. If you're able to support our class and our work, please give to chabadkingsborough.org/donate. Remember to subscribe to our classes. If you like the class, click on like. Forward to your friends, so we can inspire more and more Jews. Louder. Okay. So as we mentioned in the past, in Chassidus there are many concepts of Kabbalah which are explained. One of the great revelations of the Arizal, perhaps the greatest revelation, is the concept of Tzimtzum, the contraction. In Chassidus, there's much material explanations of the Rabbi, Chassidus Chabad. The Rabbi of Chabad explained this concept at great length, beginning from the Alter Rebbe already. And as I mentioned, I worked hard for months on this particular class, myself, to understand it clearly, to put together pieces of the puzzle. And I still have to tell you that it does not include everything that Chassidus says about Tzimtzum. It includes the major concepts, the major ways of understanding, the most important, I believe, for us to understand this concept, but not all details necessarily are included. As I mentioned in the first class, that what I'm trying to do is to explain these concepts that should be understood to everyone, and to try to show you what it means to understand the concept in the Kabbalah and Chasidus. But it's not in any way instead of studying these great concepts in the actual sources, in the actual holy books and the Sfarim. This is a long class, longer than usual. Usually I try to keep my classes by 30 minutes, but this is a long class and quite deep. I was thinking of splitting it into two, but in the end, once I was getting more and more involved, I realized that it's really many pieces of one large puzzle. So I figured it's important to keep it all in one class. And I suggest you to review it several times. The good thing of a video is that you could go back, you could review this piece, you could listen to the whole class again, etc. Because there are several concepts here, each one is deep, and it's not easy. So I advise you to listen to the class several times. I will bring quite a few sources. If you're not familiar with the sources, don't worry, you still should be able to understand the class properly. In last class 16, in the fourth minute of the video, I read a translation from the Efraim, from the Arizal, the rights of the Tzimtzum, but I didn't tell you where this is in the Arizal. So I'm going to tell you now. It's Heichel Adam Kadmon, Shar Aleph, Anaf Beis. Heichel Adam Kadmon, the first gate, the second branch. Okay. So, in class 9, 10, and 11, which generally, as you realize, I build these classes one after the other, one on top of the other. It's like one long continuation. Each one serves an introduction to the next and a building block to the next. So the proper way of listening to these classes is to listen one after the other. However, if you did not, you could still go back on YouTube and watch the previous classes, but if you did not, I will give you a very short synopsis of the previous classes, which are directly connected with this. So in class 9, 10, and 11, we spoke about the infinity of God Almighty, that Hashem, God Almighty, is totally infinite, endless, has no end, has no limitation. In class 12 and 13, we explained Ein Ein Sof, the infinite light that emanates, the infinite energy that emanates from Him. Since He is infinite, so automatically, we spoke, even the word automatically doesn't fit exactly, but since He is an infinite being, there is an infinite energy that emanates from Him. And we call it, Kabbalah calls it the Ein Ein Sof, the infinite light. The reason for that is because it's similar, it has similar characteristics, several similar characteristics to light, and its relationship to its source of the light, as explained at length in class 12 and 13. Now then, in class 15, we explained why there had to be a Tzimtzum, the reason for the Tzimtzum. I believe it says in Chassidus, there's nothing that had to be. God couldn't, there's nothing about God that He had to do it one way or another way. But, this is my memory of my study in the past. But Hashem wanted to do it in a way that we could understand. That we can understand how He did it. So therefore, He did it within, sort of, so to speak, the rules of logic. The rules of logic is a poor... He made it in a way that we could understand it. So therefore, we say that there had to be the Tzimtzum. What means there had to be the Tzimtzum? The way we understand it, there had to be the Tzimtzum. So the first reason for that is because the infinite energy was infinite. And to create a finite being, you need to do something with that infinite energy. From infinite energy, you cannot create a finite world, a finite creation, finite creatures. Number 16, class 16, we spoke about that in the, so to speak, when the truth of godliness is revealed, there is no place for anything else, because in essence, He is the reality of everything else. So when that is revealed, nothing else can exist. As explained at length at class 16. So therefore, there had to be a tzimtzum, a contraction of this infinite energy. We're going to focus now a little bit on the first reason that we spoke about the tzimtzum, which is in class 15, which is Gvul and Bli Gvul, the finite and infinite problem. So this is explained in Tanya Perek Mem Ches. We learned it, the 48th chapter of Tanya. He explains the difference between finite and infinite. And he says that something finite, even large and small, has a erech to each other. But finite and infinite has no erech. It's very difficult to translate the word erech. So the best way to translate it is to explain it, which we did 2 classes ago, but I'm just going to review it quickly for the purpose of our class. When you have 2 things which are, he gives an example of misparim, of numbers. When you have 2 things which are very far apart, you have, in one corner you have $1, in the other corner you have a big bag of $1,000,000 single dollars. 1 in a million, very far apart. Yet they're still be'erech. Why are they be'erech? Because in essence, 1,000,000 is comprised of 1,000,000 ones. And if you take 1 out of that bag, you'll have less than 1,000,000. If you add this dollar to that bag, you'll have more than 1,000,000. You have 1,000,001. There is some type of relationship. 1,000,000 is comprised of 1,000,000 ones, or 1,000,000,000, or 1,000,000,000,000. It doesn't matter. Since they're all limited, therefore they have some type of relationship one with the other. They have an erech. As he calls it, erech v'yachas. I'm looking for the word yachas. Yachas klal, yeah. He has the yachas means relationship. Is it relative one to the other? Yes, it is. However, something which is infinite, which we cannot really imagine completely, but we could have perhaps some type of imagination. Something that's told, you cannot have infinite dollars, you cannot have infinite limited things, but relative to infinity, relative to something which is unlimited, 1 and 1,000,000 and 1,000,000,000 is the same thing. It's all nothing. They're literally considered as nothing. Okay? So how do we create a stone or a planet from an infinite energy? So you understand, so generally, this I want to bring to the type of tzimtzum this is. The type of tzimtzum this is unique. It's called tzimtzum b'bchinas siluk. And Chassidus, it's called Tzimtzum b'bchinas siluk. The contraction is in a way of siluk. Siluk means take away completely. There's Tzimtzum b'bchinas miyut and there's Tzimtzum b'bchinas siluk. Tzimtzum b'bchinas miyut means you just give less. You give less. For instance, you have I would imagine, the water that comes from the city, the water supply. It's millions of gallons of pressure. We cannot handle that. It comes in our sink. It comes a little bit that we could handle it, that we could stick out a cup of water and fill up a cup of water. If we would put that cup in front of the large pipes and tubes of water, the cup would fly away. We weren't able to drink from it. Too much, too strong. We give a little bit. We give a little part of it. So let's take this to how Chassidus explains. This is, I think what I just mentioned is also mentioned in Chassidus, I think, but I don't remember the source. But anyway, what we want to explain now is like this. From Tafshin Beis, as we mentioned, you always want to give sources. Sefer Marim Tafshin Beis, page 28. And here it's talking about, usually Chassidus talks about it as a teaching from a teacher to a student. You hear? From a teacher to a student. The teacher is way above the student. So usually the teacher is be'erech to the student. The teacher is be'erech to the student, meaning, good, he's smart, he's much smarter. So the student cannot handle the whole concept. He can only handle part of it. He gives him part of it. He gives him a chelik. He gives him a little bit. He gives him a bit of the whole piece, of the whole concept. Something that he can handle. That is called the Tzimtzum b'chinas miyut. So let me translate here, page 28 of Tafshin Beis, the difference between Tzimtzum Arishin and Tzimtzumim. The first Tzimtzum, which is Siluk, and the Tzimtzum, the contraction of Seder Ishtalshalus. Now, what's Seder Ishtalshalus? Eventually we're going to study all about it. but we didn't study yet. So just to mention, many of us know there's a concept of 10 Sefirot. Many of us know there's a concept of the 4 worlds. Each one is degrading from the other. They're all different grades, different levels of creations, that the higher one gets more of a revelation of God's energy, and the lower one gets less of the revelation of God's energy. Our physical world is the last ring of this chain, where Hashem is totally hidden. So say that Hishtalshelus comes from the word shalshelis, which in Hebrew means a chain. A chain, every ring is connected with the other. There's the top ring and the bottom ring, but if you pull the bottom ring, you could pull the top ring as well. Why? Because they're all connected. Which means that they're all be'erech. They're all relative to each other. So there, when the different levels are relative to each other, so all you need a lesser energy for level number 2 than level number 1. So basically you give a little bit less energy. The Tzimtzum, that is in a way of miyut, that you just give less. He says a little bit is left from the first light, from the first energy. The level B cannot handle the entire energy of level 1. So it only gets a little bit of it, what it can handle. But however, the Tzimtzum, which is in a way of siluk, which means that the original energy is totally drawn back, nothing is left from that energy. Now when we say drawn back, we have to remember we're talking about godly things, spiritual things, which obviously are not within the realm at all of physical space. The Alter Rebbe, when he discusses this, he says, what does this mean? Yeah, Kutetere is Sofis. We're going to quote this Maimer a few times. So this Maimer is Lahavin Mashakosov Be'etzes Chaim, his Sofis Tevayikra, L'Kutetere. Page Nun Aleph B. So here on page 51b, so here on 51c, he asks, it's all strange, it's not understood. How is it possible to withdraw light to the side? This Chaim said it went to the side. With the infinite light. It has nothing to do with physical space. It was in the middle, now it's on the side. What does this mean? Yeah. Let's keep it open. We're going to need it later. So this concept of withdrawing is all a concept. It's a spiritual concept. It's not a physical thing. First it was here, then it was there. No. We are used to thinking as physical people. We understand things, even science. It's all about physical things. Physics. But here we're talking about spiritual, and we're talking about divine, godly things, divine things. Divine energy. So, Gettlichkeit, godliness. So obviously, it has nothing to do with physical space. It's only concepts, which we're going to explain as we continue. So, what are we saying here? That this contraction couldn't be an Efraim of mute. Okay, we'll explain it soon. What we're going to do is like this. We're going to explain the basics. Then we'll explain at length. We'll explain the basics in short with the sources. Then we'll explain at length the parables and examples which are brought in Chassidus. And then we'll explain at length the nimshal, which means the analog, which means what we understand the way it's above, the way it's by Hashem. So officially the Tzimtzum is Siluk. Everything was withdrawn. The infinite light was totally withdrawn. But the truth is that it was not. Something stayed. And this is also in Kabbalah. The Eitz Chaim, I believe, I think I mentioned in the past, was also written by Rabbi Chaim Vital, I'm almost sure, which was a major student of the Arizal. So, at the beginning of Eitz Chaim, it talks about the Tzimtzum, and then there's a footnote to Haggadah, and it says, "V'nishar cholol lav davka," that after the Tzimtzum, after the infinite light was withdrawn, it was the space was empty. Which again, it's not about physical space at all. There was an emptiness of this infinite light. So it's not a cholol, v'nishar cholol lav davke cholol. Not necessarily totally empty, ki nishar sham reshimum ha'er, because really a trace of the light was left. There was still a drop of light left. Okay. We're going to see soon. This takes about this takes a long time to explain. So step by step. So what do we have? We have that on one hand we're saying that it was the light was b'chinas siluk, the energy was totally removed. We're saying really it was not totally removed. Really a drop did stay, a trace stayed. What is a trace? So this is still, we're not explaining the thing entirely yet. So we're still in the point, in the basics of this concept. So it's explained in the Derech Netzach and Amonos Alakus, chapter 6. He says this trace of light, of energy, is so far removed of the original energy, it's like limit relative to unlimited. He said, and therefore it's called a reshimu. He said it's like a trace, like somebody writes something and then he erases it. So something is left, a little trace is left. But nothing really significant is left from what was written before. Shnat Kuli, it was all taken. Just a trace, ba'alma, just a trace is left. The same way, this ray that's left after the Tzimtzum is like nothing relative to the original energy which was infinite. Okay. Now right now we're talking like in the air. With Hashem's help, after we finish this class, hopefully you will understand it very well. You hear? Okay. Okay. So the example that's given in Chassidus is from a teacher and a student, as we mentioned earlier. So this is brought down in many places, but it's explained very well in Tiku, the first Maimer of Tofresh Samach Aleph, and in the Maimer Vahi B'mei Achashverosh Tofresh Samach Tes. Tofresh Samach Tes. Okay. So this is probably our main source. This Maimer is probably our main source. Okay, there's different sources. We'll see. Okay. So, as we explained, so there is when the teacher is not so far removed from they're both regular people. One is older, one is younger, one studied more, one studied less. Not a big deal. So, he cannot give the student the whole concept, he gives him a part of it. Right? Then there is, if we could somehow imagine a student that is totally different waveline. A genius of a different class. Let's say, I don't know, Einstein and a regular 5th grader. Okay? I don't know if that's correct. That's a correct analogy, but it'll perhaps help us to explain. So Einstein and a fifth grader. Okay, the teacher and the student, which are totally not relating to in philosophy and logic and in their way of understanding things. It's totally different planets. Now, this teacher, which is so removed from the student, wants to explain something, teach them to the student. So, teach him something, teach him for 5th grade curriculum. No, he wants to teach him something from his understanding, of his invention, of his understanding of the world, or whatever. Is that possible? So it's like this. You know what? We're going to take it a little bit also to Mishnah and Gemara. I know many of our listeners that did not study Mishnah and Gemara, the Talmud. But let me just say, and actually the Kutateda in the Sufis, that same Maimer on page Nun Gimel, page 53, see, it's explained, he connects this concept, this parable that we're explaining, the Tzimtzum, to Mishnah and Gemara. So Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote the Mishnah about 1800 years ago, which is which holds within it the entire Talmud. Entire Talmud, and eventually thousands and thousands of books and responsa, and till the Shulchan Aruch, and much more responsa. Thousands and thousands of books are based on what? On 60 little tractates of the Mishnah. Often there could be one Mishnah of maybe 5 or 10 lines that there could be 20 pages of Talmud on it. Easy. With each page of Talmud has dozens, hundreds and hundreds of commentaries. Hundreds for sure. All that is somewhat included, can be found, traced to the Mishnah. Pretty much. So you could say, perhaps, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, one of the greatest sages and geniuses that we ever had, he wrote the Mishnah. So he was able to include and encapsulate so much wisdom and so many halachas and so many queries and questions and answers and arguments, all in these words of the Mishnah. Every word and every letter was written in extreme, in an exact way. There's no extra letter or word in the Mishnah. And the Gemara dissects the Mishnah. So, let's say somebody studied the Mishnah and the 5 lines of Mishnah with the 20 pages of Talmud with dozens and dozens of commentaries. He studied many. It took him, maybe it could take you a year. He studied many times, 10 times. It took him 10 years. Okay? Now when he looks at the Mishnah, and he has a pretty good head also. When he looks at the Mishnah, he sees, he could talk about every line in the Mishnah for 10 hours. It's all contracted in those words. Okay, so I'm giving it a little bit of an example. So there is a possibility we can have some type of understanding. So there's the way a 10-year-old learns the Mishnah and translates it, takes him 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And then there's the way the advanced Talmudist that studied the Mishnah for 10 years. What do you mean? How could he study it? I studied for 30 minutes. Because he studied with all the commentary, with all the Talmud and commentaries. And those are being repeated many times, those are very, very well. Reviewed it many times. So perhaps we could say that we could understand some type of ein areich, that there is no relation between one and the other. It's like so far apart. Okay, let's go back to the student and the teacher. So the way the teacher understands whatever concept he wants to explain to the student, he cannot talk, he cannot relate to the student. The way the teacher understands it on his level, there's no relationship to the student at all. With all the breadth and all the depth, if he starts talking in his language to the student can just go all mixed up. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. It's too much. Cannot handle it. Forget it. So what is he supposed to do? He cannot give part of his, you cannot give a little bit of infinity. Now we're saying infinity, it's not real infinity. Einstein was also a human being, and he was limited. He probably made mistakes in his physics. I'm not well versed, but he's a human being like me and you. But we're trying to give some type of example. So this great philosopher, the great physicist, the great scientist is talking to a 5th grader. He cannot relate his concept to the 5th grader, even a drop of it, the way he understands it. The 12-year-old doesn't know what he's talking about. The 10-year-old doesn't know what he's talking about. We're talking about a smart kid. But he still doesn't know what you're talking about. He cannot relate. There's no relation. It's not in his world. He cannot give part of it, part of infinity. What does he have to do? He has to make a tzimtzum b'bchinas siluk. He has to withdraw. He has to stop thinking. He has to stop thinking the way he thinks, because as long as he thinks the way he thinks, he sees in this concept the whole breadth and depth. He could talk about it for hours. Yeah, but the kid or the student, the adult, will just be blown away. He'll just get mixed up. He's Talmud. He'll just get all mixed up. Nothing is going to help. He's going to get nothing. You want to give him everything, he's going to get nothing. So what is he supposed to do? He's supposed to make a tzimtzum. He's supposed to stop thinking. Stop thinking the way you think. As long as you are thinking in your concept the way you understand it, you have no relation to the student. You have to stop thinking and then relate to the student. This is explained in Tofresh Samach Tes, as I mentioned, Tiku Samach Aleph, and in Ve'emech HaShverish Tofresh Samach Tes. Also, we're taking a little bit from Rabbi Zalman Gopin, which is today one of the greatest teachers of Chassidus in the world. He wrote about Tzimtzum, Kav, and Shimul. Tzimtzum, Nekudas, Shimul, and Kav. He wrote in the Chabad Kevitz number 14. So I'm taking a little bit from that as well. When he stops thinking, he could start relating to the student. What is the student? And let's enter the world of the student. What could he understand? While the teacher is thinking on his terms, he's not relating to the student at all. The student is in a different planet, different world. Cannot teach him anything. Once the teacher stops thinking about this concept completely, as it says in Samach Tes Kuf Mem Zayin, Ki'ilu lehiskil shum seichel klal, as he never thought about anything. He has to stop completely thinking. And then he enters the world of the student. What could the student grasp? Now he entered the world of the student, there is some type of relationship. He can start even communicating. Before there's no communication, zero. He assessed the capability of the student. He knows the student already. And he's okay. Now he starts getting it. Okay, this is what the student can handle. Now what does he do? He wants to teach him not something else. He wants to teach him his concept, but to that student. So the first thing he has to do is stop thinking. Stop thinking at all. Enter the world of the student. Start communicating with him and relate to him. Start relating to him. Once you're relating to him, you're in his world. You have to be careful here. You have to be careful. He goes back to his concept, but he has to be careful. As he says here in Samach Aleph, that this is through the blank. He has to make a blank first. He has to make a Tzimtzum first. And this Tzimtzum is felt more that he did stop thinking and he's in the world of the student, that he feels more, and that's more overpowering than his understanding, his original thought. Excuse me, because once he goes back to his original thought and gets lost and caught up with it, that's it. He lost the student again. So after the Tzimtzum, which means after he blanks himself and he enters the world of the student, he's holding on, so to speak, to the world of the student, and then he remembers, as he said, he says over here, it's like from a distance, he remembers his concept. Like makif, I'm going to look over here for each word, but basically he has to go back to his concept, but from a distance. Right now he's in the student's world. Right now he's communicating with the student. What could he tell him? He wants to communicate to him this deep concept, but if he gets caught away with his deep concept, with all his depth and breadth, forget it, he lost the student again. So he has to stay in the world of the student and go back, but be careful. He goes back, he remembers what from sort of a distance, what his concept was, what the whole depth was, but he's doing that while he's in the world of the student. And then he takes that concept and finds words, not parables, finds wording, simple wording, perhaps parables as well, to put it in that concept, that same concept. He's not giving him something else. He's giving him the same concept, but the same concept in the world, in the words, in the parables that the student could understand. Understand? So what happens? In the Mishnah, you have amazing depth. But a 10-year-old can read it, and all he sees is he's translating. One opinion, another opinion. Rabbi says this, Chacham say that. Okay? Then, for 300 years, the sages of the Talmud scrutinized and dissected every word and every letter, and even the order of the Mishnah, why this and why that, and from here it seems this, and from that it seems that, the beginning, the end, the Reisha, the Sefer, dissecting every word and studying it until they derived the whole information that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi put into the Mishnah. Quite fascinating. But the Chassidus brings the concept that al-achre aboim shnin koyim adaita derabe, which is really in Aramaic. After 40 years, the student could come to the understanding of the teacher. You don't need 300 years of the Talmud, 40 years. But basically, it means like this. That the teacher, again, what is he giving the student? He has to give him his very same seichel, his very same logic, his very same idea. He's not giving him a different idea. He's giving him the same idea. But he's putting it in such words that the student can understand. Not just that, but he is hiding his depth in those words. He's hiding the breadth and depth of and the richness of that logic, of that concept, in those simple words. And as the student grows, becomes wiser and smarter, he physically grows, his mind grows, his knowledge grows. Eventually he could reach that depth of the teacher. That the teacher snuck in and hid in those words, those special wording, those careful choosing of words that he gave the student. So it's all hidden in there. Okay? Understood? So here you have an amazing thing. Amazing. Okay. You have an amazing thing. When the teacher and student are relating to it, they could relate to each other, and that Tzimtzum is only in a way of mute. He gives him only a little bit. He gives him a little bit. He gives him a quarter. Doesn't get the other 3/4 he doesn't get. He can only take part of it. Yeah. But when he gives him Tzimtzum siluk, when he gives him when there's a Tzimtzum that he cannot relate to him at all directly, he must make this complete Tzimtzum. And then Chazar Veheir, he brings the light back again. He brings his depth back through the Tzimtzum. In the world of the Talmud, the world of the student that we just explained, what happens? He's giving him his whole depth. He's not giving him a part, he's giving him everything. But in a way that the student could grasp now, in simple words. And the more the student grows and deepens his mind into those same words, he finds more depth and more depth and more depth until he reaches the original intention and idea what the teacher wants to relate. Understood? Huh? So here you have everything. You have the teacher is able to give the student the entire idea through this Tzimtzum siluk. Okay. Now, what happens is like this. There's another concept. This is very similar, but another concept. This wording, this simple wording that the teacher found to give the student was really included before. It was the same concept. It was there. It was not a new concept, it's the same concept. It was included in the whole wealth and depth and breadth of the way the teacher understood it originally, right? But what happens is it's not. You cannot find it. It's totally overwhelmed within the depth of the way the teacher understood it, right? It's totally overwhelmed. Maybe you want to sit here. You could just sit there, right in the back of the camera. No, okay, sorry, fine. So, it was included before. It's not. He didn't find it somewhere else. It's the same concept, but it's totally overwhelmed by the richness and depth of the way the teacher understands it. It's not recognized. All this is explained in Samachtes, especially at length, and in many other places. So it's there, but it's not recognized. It's like all mixed in with the depth, and you cannot find it. You cannot detect it because it's so overwhelmed within the rich light of the depth of the concept. What reveals it? The Tzimtzum. There has to be a separation between the element that the student can understand and the element that the teacher understands. He calls it Chetzenis Aprimis, the inner and the outer. The outer element is what the student understands. The inner element is what the teacher understands. So for it to be recognized as a separate entity, that he could relate it to the student, there has to be the Tzimtzum. He has to stop thinking. As long as he's thinking on his own terms. If the teacher is thinking on his own terms with a great depth and breadth and richness, so much light, so much logic, so much intense logical light, intellectual light, you cannot recognize those simple words. But he has to, once he makes a tzimtzum, and he stops thinking of his concept, and he enters and he relates, communicates, first relates even, enters the world of the student, then he finds words that he could relate to the student. As long as he's thinking her terms, he cannot find the words. Because those words are there, but they're totally overwhelmed within the greater light. Understood? Now, this wording, this outer, we're calling this chitzonius, this outer element, which the teacher relates to the students, is called the student is called rishimu. That's the rishimu, the original rishimu. There's a little bit. Remember we said there's a little bit of light left. The way Hashem created the world, there's a little bit left. There's a trace. Remember, there's a trace. I thought nothing is left. No, there's a trace. Eventually, we're going to see that it's different. By Hashem, it's different than by a human being, obviously. But we're going to explain the difference. Soon. That's why I have to explain this all in one class. So these simple wording that the teacher gives the student, that withholds it within itself, really, these simple wording is called the rishimu, the trace. Now, listen to this. This is beautiful. So this rishimu, okay, so first, whoever studied this, the rishimu, I personally had a lot of trouble understanding how the rishimu fits in with Tzimtzum. Eventually, I really worked hard on it and studied different sources, and Baruch Hashem, with Hashem's help, I believe I got it. So, first I want to mention to you that this is for the more advanced. Give me 1 minute for the more advanced. They can read it in the actual source. Whoever is listening. So, look at some. So, I always had issues with Rishimu. It says in Chassidus, Rishimu is B'chinas Asius. I'm not even going to translate it. B'chinas Asius. I never understood it. So, if you look in Samach Tes, page Kuf Mem Daled and Kuf Mem Ches, pretty much the middle of Kuf Mem Daled, the middle of